Hello, welcome to the show. I'm Gigi Kopilak. At the Art Gallery at the Rockefeller State Park Preserve, there is an exhibition right now. It's called Beautiful Paintings, and it's featuring the work of Richard Hamilton. It's been curated by Audrey Leeds, and the co-curator was John Woodward. And John and Kristine Woodward are with us today. They are the co-owners of the Woodward Gallery, which is on the Lower East Side in New York City. I'd like to welcome you, Kristine. Thank you for coming. And
Thank
John.
you. Thank you.
So your gallery, which I visited, which is fabulous because you're walking around this street and it's sort of like Chinatown, and then all of a sudden this beautiful red gallery comes up and it's beautiful inside. Well, you had originally started in Soho, didn't you?
Yes, we did. Thank you very much for having us. We're delighted to be here.
Yes.
We started in Soho. We had been in Soho for 15 years and we were growing, and we thought it would be important to find a space that we could grow with. And so we looked around the neighborhood, but Soho had really lost its soul. The flagship stores for so many of the merchandisers were moving in and galleries were moving out. So we had a choice. We could either move to Chelsea with so many other galleries, right, or further east. And John and I have always worked off the beaten path, and we decided to move into the Lower East Side, and we found our place on Eldridge Street.
Yeah, that's fabulous down
Thank
there.
you.
The new museum is near you, so you came in around the same time as the new museum.
We did. It was actually very lucky. Our clientele, we figured our clientele would come wherever we set up shop, but it was so exciting because when we built our space, the new museum was in construction and built and opened a few months after us. So it was a big, exciting time on the Lower East Side.
Right, and you were just like one of 3 galleries at the time,
Yes.
weren't you?
We were the third gallery that opened in the area.
And now
today there's over 100.
Yeah, there's a lot of this going on down there. And so do you have like a specific artist that you're looking for when you choose your work, or you know, what do you, I know you have some graffiti artists, or
well, we have street artists, graffiti artists, fine artists, contemporary artists, and our main focus is beautiful aesthetics. We've been always after beautiful aesthetics in whatever form that may arrive.
Also, we enjoy dealing with blue chip art, such as Andy Warhol, that's a big favorite of the gallery, Jean-Michel Basquiat, Keith Haring, Mark Rothko, de Kooning, Franz Klein.
So you're mentioning Andy Warhol. Could you tell us a little about your background, John?
I actually came in contact with Andy when I was in my 20s, and I worked at a deli on 17th and 3rd called Pie in the Sky. And one day the owner of the place said, "We have to do a delivery to the factory," and I said, "I'm doing it." So at that point I became the official delivery personnel for the factory on Union Square. And
Andy Warhol really liked him.
Well, John, you had an art background, didn't you?
Yeah, I had an art background, and you know, it was very much exciting to get there and just to deliver food and get a great tip, but yet alone meet Andy Warhol and his crew. And this went on for some time. It was very exciting.
Yeah, I'll bet it was.
This was at the time when Andy Warhol was issuing his Interview magazine, and he had delivered many copies of the Interview magazine to be put out at Pie in the Sky, and would sign them over to John.
Yeah, he would sign them to me, and I usually took one and kept it for my collection. But he was a very generous man, and I truly enjoyed knowing him.
I'll bet. And your background is totally different.
Totally different. I don't have a formal art background, but it was baptism by fire and John's education. We've known each other since I was 19. I started off in the medical field. I worked at Beth Israel Medical Center. And so I was still in college when John found me, and we met at Pie in the Sky.
And then you made this decision to open this gallery. But you had started collecting. Is that, and so you had that background, and
always had an art background. Went to the School of Visual Arts on 23rd, and there I met Keith Haring, and he was a local artist in the area, so you could run into these people time and again.
Just let's look at a couple of your artists, because you have a stable of artists, is what we call it. And so let's just look at a few of them. We'll go in alphabetical order, just not to, okay?
Okay.
So one of the first ones is, how do you pronounce this? Is it a woman or man? Man,
Rick Begnode.
Yeah.
Rick Begnode is a West Coast artist. He is Robert Rauschenberg's nephew, and he has some wonderful paintings with found fabrics that he reimagines into
Is that what
his-
we're looking at now?
Yes.
Found fabrics?
Yeah, the artist has spent years traveling the world. He's actually, not only is he a great artist and related to Robert Rauschenberg, but he was the chef for the band The Grateful Dead for over a decade.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And as he traveled with them, he would collect fabric from all over the world.
Oh.
And he'd bring it back to the studio that he shared with Robert Rauschenberg in Captiva Island, Florida.
Okay.
And as years went on, he developed his own technique. And Mr. Rauschenberg told us about him. And then eventually we hooked up, and we're very proud to have him on board.
Okay. And then another one, the next one is,
Susan Breen.
okay.
Yeah,
And
Susan Breen. She's based in Connecticut. John found Susan at the School of Visual Arts and Master's program so many years ago.
Well over 10 years ago. Her
I really,
work,
I
I
think-
really like
we're-
her work.
yeah.
It's very ethereal and
very ethereal, spiritual, esoteric,
Soulful.
soulful is a very strong
Yes.
word of
it's
it.
beautiful.
And I sort of feel that I rescued her from the school because they had other plans for her. And we're very proud to have her
Yeah,
on.
I like her palette too,
Yeah.
the color she uses. And then we'll just do a couple more, and then we'll do some more later. But what's the next one?
Well, Thomas Bildmore, we just kind of discovered Thomas Bildmore, and he's really exciting. His new body of work has to deal with the old masters,
Okay.
and this is an homage to Monet's
Are they-
flowers.
Is these paintings?
Yes, they're contemporary street art versions of the old masters' works. So this one is in spray paint.
Oh, okay.
Uh-huh.
All right.
They're very special paintings. We've
Are
never
they
seen
very
it.
large? Are
They're
they
small and large. They come in various sizes. But
Yeah.
there's an incredible consistency in the application, and the flowers just jump right out at you,
Okay.
just from spray paint.
So I think this is something where you're looking back at the old masters, and this is a new form of art that's happening lately a lot, I think.
Everything old is new again.
Yeah, okay.
Everything old.
All
is
right,
new.
that's what
That
we'll
is-
say.
That is so
and then,
true.
And Edgar?
Natalie Edgar, she used to be a critic for the Art News magazine, and was married to the late abstract expressionist Philip Pavia, who used to be dear friends with de Kooning. She was formerly trained by Mark Rothko. She edited most recently Club Without Walls, her husband's publication. She's a fine artist, a true second generation abstract expressionist.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and she was as she was coming up as a woman in the abstract field, she was so critiqued by the male mentors, and she really has achieved great success.
Great. And then the last one that we'll show right now is Mastroianni.
Mark Mastroianni, yes.
Okay.
Mark is a dear person. He does wonderful paintings of very natural surroundings, inspired currently from his place in Cherry Valley. He used to have dual residence in Sweden and New York, and now Cherry Valley. He was recently at the Four Seasons restaurant in the lobby on feature, and
Okay.
yeah.
We'll get to the Four Seasons because
Yeah.
that's one of your projects.
Yes,
But
we'd
Yeah,
love to
Mark-
talk about that.
Mark was a painter for the artist Malcolm Morley for many years.
That's
okay.
right.
And he lived on the Bowery, and we actually met him in Sweden, and over 12 years ago at least.
20.
Yeah. So,
So is this typical, Snowball, is that typical, sort of monochromatic of his work, or is this just a...
taking a natural element, whether it be sky, clouds, earth, soil, ice, fire.
All right.
And
Painting.
Yeah,
Just a
and then
painting.
incorporating it into the nature of his work. Very
Okay,
much
well,
so.
all right, we'll get to some other of your artists, but let's skip over to Richard Hamilton, whose show is at the Rockefeller State
Right.
Park right now, at the Art Gallery.
That's right.
And let's talk a little bit about him. How did you first get to...
Well, Audrey Leeds from the Art Gallery at Rockefeller State Park Preserve approached us about some of our artists, and we began discussion on Richard Hamilton and the beautiful paintings in particular, and it just exploded from there. We're very passionate about Richard Hamilton. He is a very important artist that we have been monitoring since I was a very young girl. It was actually one of the first artists that John and I collected together.
Yeah, I mean,
But he was a street artist, am I right? Because this mass murder series that he did, where the chalk on the ground, were they in California, did you say? Or
well, he originated in Vancouver
Okay.
and British Columbia, and then he worked his way down the coast to California. And there he started to do his series called Image Mass Murder.
So how do you collect a graffiti artist?
Well, you know what? He doesn't really respond to a title of graffiti because
Okay.
oh,
I'm
it's
glad you're saying
it's
that.
really everybody says that of Richard's work. While he was contemporaries of Jean-Michel Basquiat and Keith Haring, Richard is really a conceptual artist, and being conceptual, it's the public's response that completes a project for him. So he just started with this image mass murder series and put it on city streets to elicit a reaction, and all of a sudden all of the newspapers started remarking on how Richard's image mass murder, they didn't know who the artist was or what was happening, but all of a sudden the community felt that there was a murderer on the loose.
Well, it was one of the first times where an artist used psychological drama as an artifact. I mean, when he did these in the hills of San Francisco and in very quiet neighborhoods where low crime rates, that's what really triggered it. He wanted to make them more aware of what reality was outside
somewhere
of
else.
Yeah, so he literally
That's right.
put down a few hundred of these. And people would wake up, walk their dogs, and see these things all over the place and think there were people dead all over the place. No such thing. It was just a psychological experiment that worked incredibly well.
So I'm sorry to call him a graffiti artist. What would you say? He's a fine artist.
Well,
I will agree to that. But but that's become fine art now, graffiti art.
We wouldn't want to pigeonhole Richard. He's an urban artist, and he likes to be called pop expressionist.
Or neo-expressionist.
Or a neo-expressionist.
That's right.
He covers a lot of territory. I mean, the beautiful paintings are very different than the street work that he does.
And so many people were not familiar with Richard's name, Richard Hambleton, because he was known throughout the world as the Shadow Man. And being the Shadow Man, as you could see in the picture of Richard standing on the street corner, that's actually a reproduction of him. And when the elements touched the paper, he would disappear. The picture of him would disappear, and he would become a shadow figure.
In white.
In white, that's right.
So he's working on a wall, but he's working on paper?
He would take a cutout of himself, like an image of himself, and he would wheat paste it, which is a solution you make. And he would put that on the wall.
I got it.
And the ink was water soluble, so as the rain touched it, it would just literally wash it out and leave a silhouette.
That's terrific.
But the black shadowy figures are all paint, and he became very proficient at getting them up very quickly because it was a form of vandalism, and he was in and out very, very quickly posting those shadowy figures. So the communities that hundreds of them, thousands
he's in New York at this point, isn't he, with the shadow figures?
Yeah, I mean, the image of mass murder migrated across America, and when he got to New York, he just jumped on the opportunity to do the shadow figures, and it was the perfect setting. You know, the nightlife, which is what it's called. He would go out usually after midnight, and most of them, actually all of them, are acrylic paint. First, when he did them, he did them in oil and realized when the paint was flying all over the place, it got on his skin and his eyes. He couldn't get it off, and it was much easier to wash off acrylic. So that was a big discovery on his part, and it was a very covert operation.
Well, that's
He would have the paint in a coffee can with the brush in it inside a coat, and when no one's looking, he could jump on the roof of a car in a parking lot. So when he did the shadow figure high up and the car moved away, these figures are in the air.
Oh,
he was very smart with that.
I think you on your website you have some videos, and one of them has an interview with him, and he says something like, first he saw he was going, what is that? What is that? And it turned out to be his shadow, and that's sort of where he got the idea from. But it's kind of scary because you walk around a corner and you see this shadowy figure, and you don't know, is it real?
Exactly, Gigi, exactly, and it goes back to him being a conceptual artist, and he wanted to evoke a reaction. And so the shadow figures, at first you were alarmed, and then you may have befriended them when you passed it time after time. And so that was the project.
It's brilliant. I mean, a psychological effect, and it's an art form. It's incredible.
He got those shadow figures on the wall of East and West Berlin.
Yep.
Interesting. And tell me about the Him in the Marlboro Man, because that's appropriation in a new way.
Yes.
But a different way than we talked about before with old masters.
Early on, Richard was fascinated with cowboys and stuff like that. He had a small sculpture of a figure on a horse bucking back. And he memorized the shapes of that to the point where he could just throw down an image of a horse or a rider. And then he used to smoke Marlboros, and as he would take the pack apart, the physical box, he discovered that there's something to this. And from just the image of the box, he developed the concept of including the whole ad in the work of art. So he would actually take it all out, except maybe the word Marlboro, and he would build on top of that as a base point for
Because
the painting.
at the time, the Marlboro ads were everywhere, and that those advertisements were on walls, and so he would paint on top of the actual ad.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So, and he was one of the first ones to do this appropriation,
Yes.
which has since become very popular.
Yeah, Richard Prince followed,
Yes.
so forth.
Right.
And again, he took these all over the world. He did them Germany, New York, Japan, Italy.
So back in the 80s and in the early 90s, John and I were collecting Richard's work from locals and from places throughout the world, and we found so many of these interesting pictures in Berlin and Europe, and so he had really gotten around.
Yeah, so that's the question I had asked before. How do you collect a conceptual artist whose work is being lost? It's deteriorating, it's gone.
Well, the works physically on the street were captured by some very, very prophetic photographers. People who recognized the images on the street as something important. Hank O'Neill is one of those people. Frank Pillai is another of those people who took photographs of Richard's work physically on the street in the 80s. And so they preserved his projects on film, whereas the original art would have disintegrated or would have been built upon. We just found something recently. Somebody was doing construction downtown on Ludlow.
They demolished the building, and
By us.
And when they demolished it, they discovered a shadow figure on the wall.
They discovered a shadow figure.
That's cool.
Yeah,
There
on
was
the
time capsule there for 30 years.
That's right.
That's very
we got
interesting.
pictures of that on our site today.
We have a picture of a show that you, was it Armani that?
A couple of years ago, we were able to get a book in Armani's hands. The only book that was conceived on Richard was a book that we created 6 years ago.
I have to tell you that it's been John's fascination to organize Richard's career, and so through a biography that John had organized, the gallery had researched all of Richard's shows and press materials and formatted it in an actual resume biography, one that he hadn't had before.
Well, there's nothing cohesive about his work. It was just all scattered, so we put it in a formula that worked, and we were able to get one of these books in Giorgio Armani's hands in Italy, and he just got very excited. He actually sponsored over 6 shows around the world for quite a bit of money, and at the same time, his whole fashion line that year was all black and white. All black and white.
And we had entree to Giorgio Armani from two fellows that had been collecting his work through us, Andy Valmorbida and Restoin Roitfeld. So Vladimir. And those two fellows helped progress Richard's work in communities that we may not have had immediate access to. And so all of a sudden we were entertaining with celebrities and others with Richard's material, and it was largely our collection.
Yeah, it was a wonderful push in regards to Richard's career, and it's going very well, very strong.
And it was interesting because in back, I think, 2007, we decided that we were finally, I was mentioning Richard's name, we were finally going to associate Richard's name with the Shadow Man. And so we had culled together an exhibition of beautiful paintings prior to this Rockefeller State Park show. And in that exhibition, we called it Richard Hambleton, Beautiful Paintings. And so finally, the names were associated with the artwork. I can't tell you how many people came out to see that exhibition. Richard had impacted so many that it was very, very interesting to hear stories and learn more about him, things that we may not have known. And so all of this had turned into a project that has become a documentary film on Richard Hambleton by being put together by...
It's being put together now. It's not out yet.
It has been in progress for about 4 years.
Okay.
And by Oscar-nominated,
Yeah.
Oscar-nominated filmmaker Orrin Jacoby.
Okay, so we're going to look for that.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's going to be very, very exciting. The cameras have been following Richard and
For
his
years.
progress for many years.
So I just want to touch on a couple of the beautiful paintings, take a look
Sure.
at them, the ones
Sure.
that are at the Rockefeller Gallery now, because they're totally different than the Shadow Man or the Marlboro Man. Or
Yes,
they're just,
and Richard was challenged when he was, people were saying you do these aggressive, angry, I don't know what the proper word is for
Psychological.
psychological,
Well, they were haunting.
haunting.
They were. You couldn't forget him, and you know he was actually being pigeonholed into. Is that all you could do?
And so he was challenged to evoke another reaction.
Yeah.
And so he went into the studio. He had always been working on beautiful paintings, but it was just the opposite of the shadow figures.
Okay.
And so he would have to spend time in the studio moving tinted varnish around metallic or mirrored surfaces to create a landscape, a seascape, a something that he termed as escape paintings.
Okay.
It's interesting to note that when Richard does the rodeos, the Marlboros, or the shadow figures, they're very spontaneous, and it's automatic. Whereas the beautiful paintings require a lot more time.
okay.
There's an enormous amount of
It's
time.
different than the conceptual. He's moving.
Yes. very
While
much
it's
so.
still a conceptual project in that it evokes that reaction, you're saying, oh my God, this is so beautiful, it's sensual, it's romantic. He most generally has a horizon line in his beautiful pictures, so you perceive it as a landscape or a picture where it's completely an abstracted image.
Okay.
There's this essence that the storm has just ended,
Okay.
and there's a
That's right.
stillness. And he wants you to go right in that painting all by yourself and experience that. Yeah.
Interesting.
Taking with you your own personal experience.
I want to just finish up with the other artists that,
Yeah.
you know, we said there was 5
Sure.
more that we wanted to talk about. I think we were up to, let's see, did we do Morrison? No, we didn't do
We're
Morrison.
probably up to Margaret Morrison.
Yeah.
Margaret Morrison does 2 forms of painting, all very well. She's been with us probably for 20 years. Margaret this is a figurative painting. She also does paintings, very large scale, effervescent paintings with beautiful rich color of candy and flowers.
Oh, okay.
And toys.
Photorealism, sort of.
Extreme, super realism, hyper realism.
There's a spiritual quality to everything she paints.
Yes.
It's very angelic. And I discovered Margaret in Soho at a very small gallery. It was a co-op gallery on Prince Street. And it was in the basement. And as I was walking by, I noticed these very large paintings. They were 7 feet tall. And they were all of jars, giant pickle jars, mayonnaise, peanut butter. And I walked in, and they were all, you could literally stand in these paintings. They were so big. And they were beautiful, and they were all sold. And I asked who it was. And one of the things that really got me was the person who ran the gallery said that, I said, this painting of a peanut butter jar is phenomenal. And she said, well, the artist actually used peanut butter in the paint.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
So, you know, the paintings really struck me. I hadn't seen anything like that. And from that point, we developed a relationship that we've had for, what, 15 years?
It's probably 20 now.
Maybe
yeah.
20?
You both agree when you choose an artist. You each of one.
We agree. Chris makes the final decisions.
Okay.
And,
John is our director and curator, but since we're married, we kind of delineate our roles.
well, we cover each other's back, and
Okay.
we can move around a lot more.
Okay, let's talk to about the next one. Nakayama, is it?
Kenji Nakayama. Kenji Nakayama is remarkable.
Yeah.
A Japanese artist. He moved to Boston,
Formerly trained.
formally
Are
trained.
these
in-
paintings also?
They are, and this is unbelievable because this is hand-cut stencils and spray paint.
There's
So
no photographs in
there are
there.
no photographs. This is spray paint that makes up these images.
Wow.
And what he does is, if you see anything dealing with like a forest or anything natural in there, it's based on a stencil that he did in Japan.
Okay.
And if you see anything relating to the city, that's New York. So it's a combination of both images to create one.
Yeah, it's been an ongoing
Beautiful.
project, The Concrete Jungle.
Yeah, I hope people go to your gallery and see some of these works because it's really hard to see it on the television. But you know, we'll just finish up. We've got a couple
Thank
more.
you. We
It's
try to
meant-
develop our website, woodwardgallery.net, because you could, at your leisure, look at some of the artists, see a...
We have media clips, a lot of
yeah.
history about our gallery over
You
20
kind of get
years.
a feel for some of the artists
Yeah,
that
we're
speaking
just
about.
we're just
Absolutely.
touching on a few of them. There,
Right.
you have a lot more. I understand that. But then we have Matt Siren.
Matt Siren is just known throughout the world for his ghost girl icon.
Okay.
And we're doing a project with Matt and some other street artists later this summer that I'll tell you about.
And then we have two more.
Joellen Van Ouwerkerk. Joellen Van Ouwerkerk is another surreal artist. That
Yeah, I think this painting is called
Birds Flying Backwards.
It's she bases a lot of her paintings on characters from the 1800s. In this case, it was a sitting model for Rossetti in Europe, and it really struck her, and the essence of the bird fluttering on the back of a woman's neck, creating a sensation, so to speak.
And the last one, I think this is interesting. She's a really surreal.
Oh, Kristine Vergano. If I have 2 seconds, I have to tell you how we met her.
Okay.
One of our dogs, we always have our Shar-Peis at the gallery. One of our dogs, it is 20 years ago, right?
Yes.
20 years ago, she was having an art exhibition. A building was having an art exhibition. She had the studio in the basement, and one of our dogs got off lead and ran to the basement of this building, and I chased after her. The dog was Rinky. I chased after Rinky, and Rinky was sitting in Kristine Vergano's studio and just sitting with her very, very peacefully. And Christina had paintings on the wall, but one painting was of an eye, just that, an eye. And I said, wow, this is incredible. It's so realistic. It's so compelling. You feel like you need to continue looking. Stay here. And I said to the dog, stay here. Ran up to get John, who he and I were at this art exhibition together. He came down the stairs. We spoke for some time and signed her on immediately.
Oh, that's so great.
This painting of Best of All Possible Worlds is with a trompe-l'oeil frame. She's a remarkable, remarkable talent and brilliant mind.
Right, and when people are looking at it, they're going to see the words are backwards. And
they are.
The painting, the photo is not backwards; they are backwards.
Yes,
it's like she's looking in a mirror with the caption behind her, and it's a mirror image.
Yeah,
it's very interesting. You have to really think about that.
Frame.
That's right. In this
trompe-l'oeil.
particular painting, she did write with the words backwards. She writes backwards and forwards in many different languages and Latin.
Okay.
There's also, everything that she creates has almost like an undercurrent of eroticism to it in a way. There's a slight erotic feel to all her work as well, which is really interesting.
We know there's so much more we could talk about. I wanted to get into a little bit about, you have art showing some of your work at the Four Seasons. You have Red Grooms at the Four Seasons, and Robert and Deanna living there.
Yeah.
But you know what? That's it. We're really almost done. And so if there's just one more thing you want to include, you want to talk about the 9/11 memorial or the something?
We do have a 9/11 memorial exhibition that we toured the United States with. It's based on the mapping of 9/11 that occurred the moment that it happened. And Dr. Sean Ahern, who runs Carsey Labs at Hunter College, was dispatched by the mayor at the time to immediately go down there, map it out, and get those maps in the rescue workers' hands. A lot of smoke and debris, heat. I look in the New York Times on September 12th, and right on the cover of those maps, and I look and see who created them, and it's my cousin, Dr. Sean Ahern. So I call him up, and I said, what's going on? And he said, I'm down here mapping. It's quite incredible. I said, I hate to tell you, but there's an art form here. So a little time passed, and we decided from all of his mapping that this would be an exhibition. So we did. We created a show called Charting Ground Zero, before and after, and it was very, very popular, and went to Denver and Washington.
And right now?
And on the 10-year anniversary, we donated it to the 9/11 Memorial Museum, and it's going to be in the permanent installation.
It's a very part of their science section of the museum.
Wow. Well, I know there's so much more I'd like to talk to you about, but I hope everyone goes down to the gallery. I hope there's still time to see the show at Rockefeller. I think it ends on the 23rd.
On the 23rd of June, yes.
And there's always great art at the Four Seasons.
There's great art at the Four Seasons.
Yes, we have project space around the city. So
right.
And that's the Four Seasons restaurant on 52nd Street.
Right, and please check out your website because you have a lot of information. Come down to the gallery, and thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And thank you for watching.